If you want to know all about volumetric video, then this episode is for you. So let's get to it. You are listening to the How to Create VR podcast, weekly conversations with VR and AR professional creators, designers, and producers. Hello and welcome to another episode of the How to Create VR podcast, where I speak with professional creators, designers, developers, and producers who work on VR, AR, and MR projects. I'm Marcelo, an immersive content specialist focused on e-learning and training. I'm also the creator and the guy behind howtocreatevr.com. My guest today is Agnis Stelingis, founder and CEO of E54, a volumetric video technology company with a mission of making volumetric video universally accessible. Today, Agnis and I will be talking all about volumetric video, what it is, how to create it, and how to use it in our next VR experience. But before we get started, I want to remind you to register at howtocreatevr.com. It's free and registration gives you access to all our live events, tutorials, practice assets, podcast interviews, videos, and more. Just visit howtocreatevr.com and click on the register for free button. Finally, if you want to attend our live events in virtual reality, join us inside Altspace VR. Just visit howtocreatevr.com/AltspaceVR and subscribe to our channel. All right, Agnis, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Marcelo. Thank you for inviting me.
I'm glad to have you here. Very much interested in volumetric video, and I have to admit that I don't know much about it. I've experienced it as a user, but I don't know much about it as a creator.
Yeah, that's a really neat topic.
Yeah, definitely. And this podcast is a little bit, I'm being selfish because really I want this podcast for me, basically.
So what you're excited about and which part you would like to know more about?
Oh, I love this. You're interviewing me now. This is perfect. Well, we're going to get to that. There's a lot of stuff I want to know. But before we do that, why don't we start with you giving us a little bit about your background? I'd love to learn more about how you got to be where you are today.
Yeah, so the way I started working with volumetric video is really started with two companies that we launched with my sister, Yeva. And it was around 5 years ago. We started 3WD Labs, which we've been working with 3D animation and mainly working with advertising agencies. And that was a period where we learned a lot about the whole process of what makes great animation. And the other company that we've been working on was Streamforce. And we've been lucky with that company to get involved into large-scale projects working with video systems, CCTV systems, for example, for London Metro or in some train infrastructures in other countries around Europe. And that's where we learned really how the whole video system works, including the processing of it, streaming, the codecs. And the most important part of it, I guess, which led us to come to what we're doing now with E54, was learning about cameras, and especially the 3D cameras. And we got our hands through the projects on these ones, and we started seeing that beneath the surface, there's a new technological wave is forming, which is volumetric video. And we started seeing a lot done with LiDARs, time-of-flight cameras, light field cameras, and stereo vision. So these are different technologies that enables volumetric video creation. Well, we spent a little bit of time on working with those, and we just figured out that we need to invest in this field. And that's what happened around 3 years ago when we started working on E54, a volumetric video capture that would be easy to use and affordable.
Why volumetric video? Like, what excited you? I mean, you kind of asked me about that at the beginning. So I'm turning that question around to you. Is what excited you about volumetric video that said you wanted to get into that?
I think there's two things that really happened to interest me most. And that's one is going a little bit deeper in my past, and that relates to my architecture course. And the other one is really the realization, this is probably the more important one, the realization that the video is really messed up in many aspects. The most important part is that the video, the digital video that we have today, is really just a representation of the reality. It's nothing close to really documenting and really recording the surrounding environment. And that struck me most. The other thing is really coming from the space of architecture. When you are through the studies, you are taught that you need to think in 3D. and you need to make models, you need to make drawings, and you need to think about environments in 3 dimensions. And for one working in this sphere, it comes very natural that we should represent things in its physical volume.
Now, you mentioned volumetric video and space and 3D. I mean, that directly correlates with virtual reality and spatial computing. In your opinion, what is the relationship between volumetric video and virtual reality?
Yeah, so that's a direct, of course. And looking at virtual reality, it sort of started when the first Oculus was launched. But if looking more technically correct, it really started many years ago or a few decades ago. But I think really you need to think about the real date when it started. It's really 2016, when the HTC Vive and Oculus really mainstream headsets were released. And that was the point where the real volumetric video development started, because it has the output devices that are ready to get the benefits of it. When you think about it, all of our devices, you can see in the market some screens coming up that you don't need the glasses, and AR mixed reality devices coming up. But the medium of VR, it really started in 2016 when the mainstream headsets were introduced. And that's the first time that we started seeing some volumetric video examples on the market. Very few, of course, and still very few you can find and download and experience. But when you think about volumetric video, it captures the full 3D physical volume of the body or the object or the moving objects. And the important part of this to experience is the immersion. When you can't really say if it's not flat, and you can't do that without the glasses.
Why don't we take a step back and just talk about volumetric video and just give an overview of what actually is volumetric video for those that don't know about it?
Yeah, so thinking about volumetric video, we can a little bit compare what we have today or what we have up to today through the evolution of the video. And it started more than 100 years ago with a course in motion with a very simple video. And that was even without a sound. And just later, we started to see black and white cinema, and then black and white with the sound, and then color with the sound. And just in the 80s, we started getting the analog and the cassettes and the film recorders that were made easy for people to create and to consume the content created. And the other thing is important that in the 80s, what happened, a company started to develop the digital codecs and formats. And just in the 90s, these happened to get to be useful with the internet revolution. And through the last 20 years, we really have the very capable digital video that we were able to take a phone and watch a movie in high fidelity, and really to capture by that same simple device as an input device to capture what we want around us. And what's happening now, and you can see that it becoming more and more public, and when we started a little bit more than 3 years ago, it was very quiet and just around 7 companies telling about what they're doing publicly. And what you can see, it's a volumetric video, and the distinguished part from the digital video is that we are using a lot from the digital video technology and the codecs itself. But what we are adding is really a depth information, and that changes everything. We have a precise depth information, or we're going to more precise month by month, that we're capable to have objects, moving objects, and people recorded in their full physical volume. So that's what volumetric video is.
So it's really, to summarize what you said, basically it's digital video with depth information. I mean, I'm simplifying it.
Simplifying, yes, this is what it is. And the other way to look into it is really thinking about the scan. Scan's been with us for quite a while, and the volumetric video in comparison to scan is like a video in comparison to a picture. So volumetric video is nothing more than, 24, 30, 60 frames of scan.
Well, now that you mentioned scans, why don't we talk a little bit about that? Because my next question was really going to be about photogrammetry and how that is different than volumetric video. So maybe you can touch upon what are the differences between those, and also what is a scan? Maybe expand a little bit on that.
So really, photogrammetry enables you to capture many pictures of the same object and then through the software reconstruct the 3D volume of it and put on top of that color texture. So when it comes to volumetric video, better term used videogrammetry, which really does the same, but in this case, you need a still studio, a still standing camera setup that is most of the time surrounding an object which stands in the middle and takes not just a picture, but many pictures or a video per second. And that enables to reconstruct the same object, but this time have many scans per second. So makes it moving object. And this is just one way to create volumetric video.
Right. And we're going to get into the different ways of creating volumetric video. But one thing of note, you mentioned having multiple cameras surround the user and capturing multiple frames per second for the movement, right? What does that do from a storage perspective? I'm assuming you end up with gigabytes or terabytes actually of data, correct?
Exactly. So these are the types of studios that Microsoft mixed reality studios using 40 views, or Intel presented their super large warehouse type studio with a little bit more than 100 cameras. So you can imagine that these cameras are at least 4K, capturing 60 frames per second, and you have 100 of these. So you need really powerful house of processing power servers running through the data and reconstructing. And it's really processing power consuming and time consuming process. So you can't get nothing to real time.
Right. I could imagine the rendering and stitching of all that. It's going to take, if not hours, days even, maybe.
Yeah, it depends how long you want the performance to go and what's the size of your setup.
So how do holograms fit into this? Can you use, as you called it, videogrammetry or volumetric video to create holograms, or are we talking about separate technologies here?
Really, yes. If talking technically, holograms are a very different thing. Holograms, actually, it's funny because now you can hear a little bit less and less and less. And I think in a few upcoming years, you will get almost zero information about holograms because it's not really the thing. And that was really proposed very much from Microsoft side. Holoportation and all their mixed reality initiative. But talking about the real technical side of holography, it's a different thing. And it's really a representation of a 3D object.
Would you use volumetric information to create this hologram, or no, it's captured in a completely different way?
No, it's like you can hear about the technologies as light field and holograms. These are different technologies because what it really shows you, it's a representation of the environment that you're capturing. So it's not giving precise information of the spatial coordinates of the pixel. And when talking about the volumetric video, why it's supreme really, because you get a very precise information about the specific point in the space. So a specific point of the object in three-dimensional space, and that's why you can go around it or you can interact with it.
Well, and that's why, going back to the original question before when I asked you the relationship between VR and volumetric video is 360 video is basically flat video, right? And volumetric video allows you, basically becomes true 3D 6 degrees of freedom, and you can walk all around it and through it, correct?
Yeah, exactly. So these are very interesting, of course. What's happening? People want the fidelity, yeah? They want the resolution, and this is what large companies want to give as fast as possible. So that's why a lot of effort is putting into light field, because it really can give you the clarity of 4K video, pixel precise. So for the user who's consuming the content is really nice experience. But the bad side or the difficult side of all of this is that it's very hard to create such content, and it's very, very expensive. Because what, for example, light field does, it really changes the pictures on each eye when you are in the VR without doing any reconstruction. So what this means, you need to capture all those pictures. So in one way, you need to have a camera per every angle in your space, in your performance that you want to take. Or you need to have some movable systems. Google presented one example from Google Light Fields, introduction to light fields. They have a nice app to see what it is on the Steam. But the downside is very hard to create and very expensive. So in comparison to volumetric video, it's very different. It's really more about getting the real data of the depth and the RGB or color, and then synthesizing it through computer vision algorithms. And more of deep neural networks and AI will be introduced in this.
Let's talk about the actual pipeline workflow. Can you guide us through production and post? What do you use to capture? What kind of equipment do you use to capture? How do you store all that? How do you stitch it, rendering, edit, that whole thing?
Yeah. So as we are coming with EFEV from the point of view that we want to make this affordable. And for the most important part, we want that people would start taking equipment into their hands and starting to really get the idea, what is this technology about and how to deal with it. So in our case, what we're using is a 3D cameras like a Kinect or Intel Realsense cameras. There are structure sensors and many more coming into the field, many more manufacturers. So what it does, it's really affordable. It costs around $200 per camera. It gives you depth information. Most of these gives you 30 frames per second and accompanies this with the video information. And this is exactly what you need to construct the point cloud and then to go from that to meshes and the texturing. So this alone, the creation from the depth and color into generating a point cloud and creating a mesh, this must be done on the provider. So in our case, EV software does this for you. In production, you really need to think about this later on as you would be dealing with the scan. So normally what you would do, you would be capturing maybe with a reality capture software. This is the most widely used software for photogrammetry, making scans. And what you would do later, you would be exporting this file into your preferred 3D editing software, 3D Max, etc., Maya, the one you like. And then you would be polishing. You would be dealing with the textures a little bit, and of course with the mesh, making more low poly and more beautifully crafted, really improving the scan on what you got from the software. The same workflow would be taking a file from Eevee, exporting it into OBJ, FBX, apply the most used 3D formats and putting into your software and then polishing and exporting back to utilize the player, the 3D player. And the one thing what is different is that you have many more scans because you have like 30 scans per second. Of course, you can choose between that, but like 24, it's reasonably good for the experience. So you have 24, 30 more scans to deal with every second. So that makes the work much more time consuming for the creator.
Exponentially harder, right? Because it's cleanup of all frames.
Yeah, cleanup, or of course, if you want to get on the creative, you really want some animation put around the volumetric video to make the experience more dramatic. And that's, of course, that's just limits the imagination. And you need to do with every frame. So that's how it goes today. But there's many things to improve the process. And this is through giving a creator smart points of data like a skeleton. And this would allow for the software to understand. Skeleton tracking is used in a lot of people in animation mostly. And that allows you very easily to add some animation and more easily to segment objects and to deal with the objects. And to really simplify the workflow, not needing to deal with every frame. So I think these improvements, these are not something we need to invent. We just need to sort of polish it, that we could simply include into our next to volumetric video file. That would simplify the workflow.
And how do we get from the final capture and cleanup and all that into, let's say, Unity or Unreal to put it into the VR experience itself?
Yeah, so it really depends on the company or volumetric video technology company, if they are providing the exporters, if they are providing different formats to be used.
I see. So there would be some sort of exporter that takes it from their software and then allows you to use it into and input.
I think this is where the industry is going, yeah, because as every company, as we do as well, we have our own format, but this is not what the user wants, because the industry of 3D editing is already a huge industry and is here for many years. And what person wants now, it's really deal with this new type of content in the way, or as more as it's possible, what one is used to.
So that means we need some sort of standardization for this type of content. What you're telling me, or what I'm hearing, is that every company basically creates their own format, and then you're depending on them to have this export that allows you to then use it wherever you want to. So do you feel that anybody's trying to take a lead in creating a standardized format that all companies like yourself and Microsoft, when they export, kind of like a PSD, right, that you can open it, or an MP4, actually more like an MP4, let's say. Do you feel like there's a company or a set of companies that are trying to lead the way there?
Yes, I think all companies, all parties are trying to get their format, ahead and really to be as a standard in the industry, as well as we are. Some companies will be doing this better, some companies will be doing worse, but the end goal is definitely this, is some standard that would really present the same functionality as current generation digital video does. So it really has a great compression. It can run very fast and it can be configurable. So people want to do their stuff and really include in their own applications. Like currently we're just talking about entertainment and experiences for VR, but the applications are limitless. I mean, we will be using volumetric video for every single application that digital video now serves for. Skype and television and many more industries like construction and healthcare. I mean, every single industry, because it's more supreme. It gives you more data. You can do more things with it. So the other thing which is important for many applications, for industry to really evolve its live streaming. And actually, this is the thing that we started our company first. We learned a lot from our first company with my sister about the streaming, about the compression of video, about different codecs. So we really been thinking about how we could solve this problem. Although we started with a really huge task because the raw depth data gives you a lot of information. But we started from this. And I think currently we're undergoing a patent for our EV codec, and we have really robust compression, which is the only solution. A few solutions are coming up, but probably the fastest stream on the market that EV is providing. And it gives you very interesting experience, because it's not recorded. You can go around a person standing, in London and you being in San Francisco. And this is actually what I've done a year ago. I've been visiting many companies, and these guys, they were really with a headset on their head walking around my colleague in London. And that's dramatic because you have a real person. You can ask him to pull the hand up and you can go below the hand. This is a really dramatic experience. It gives you very different applications.
And that's ultimately the future, where it could replace visiting. I mean, it's almost like that Star Wars scene where people are all in the same room, right?
Yeah, exactly. And this is, for me, it's the most exciting one because it's very practical and it changes everything.
I think it'll take off like when Facebook uses something like that, because then I can meet my family, even though they're somewhere else in the world. I can meet them in person. And obviously that takes social to the next level.
And it's about a good thing. Many people are saying that, but then I won't need to go to my friend and really spend time. Yeah.
Well, you can still do that.
You definitely can. We spend less and less time together on dinners, on meetings. More and more we spend really through the screen or the phone. But this is something that gives you the precise experience what we're having now when we meet, but we don't have the struggle to go there. So we save a lot of time. And I think that this part, for most, it depends on that part. If you will have a meeting or you won't with your friend, you're really saving your time, isn't it?
Right. And that's a different, to be honest with you, that question, you can say that about anything in technology, and we'll leave that for a different podcast. What I do want to ask you is, from a creator perspective, what kind of skills does a creator need to have to start doing volumetric video? What is it that they need to know know today, right? It may get simpler later, but today, what do they need to know to start doing this? And not just with Eevee, but just anything, right? If they want to get into any kind of volumetric video with any company.
I think you still have to talk about volumetric video as a product from different companies that utilizing different technologies. Because I would be talking about Microsoft Studios or Intel Studios. It really takes a lot of knowledge to operate such setup, such software. But if you're taking Eevee, for example, it's really about doing this with the least knowledge a person can have. So as simple as doing with the phone while recording a video. So that depends.
But so let's start with Microsoft and Intel. Let's say somebody, because there is a difference between what you guys offer and what Microsoft offers, right? I mean, they're using many, many more cameras. So let's talk about first, like Microsoft and Intel Studios. Would you consider that like the super high end, right, of volumetric video? So what kind of skills does a creator need to have to get involved in that?
Basic 3D artist skills, which are using or knowing few different 3D editing softwares and being able to build a model, to create a texture. It really would help if you know photogrammetry. So then you know that you need to optimize the mesh. And that's important, and you know how to deal with this. There's a lot of peculiarities about that. A part of that, I think that's about it. Because the company would be presenting you, or at least would involve you into the end stage of production when they capture, when they really generate the mesh or point cloud, and you need to clean up, and then you need to start the creative process of putting into environment, thinking about the experience of the user.
Now, what about from a performance capture point of view? In other words, the actual person you're capturing, do they need to do anything specific when capturing through volumetric video, from an acting perspective?
Not really. It's just awkward. You have many cameras around you. You have this, empty space. And you need to perform in some circled area, and it's about it. Because you don't have nothing when you film a movie with a digital video recorder. So at least you know where the frame comes from, where the camera stands. At this time, you're really free. You have the whole cage of cameras, and you're performing very freely.
And you're able to move around a specific space?
Yeah, so that depends, of course, on the setup. What is your volumetric capture area that you can stand in, and the system will capture every single part of your body.
Right. And are you also capturing audio at the same time for syncing later?
Yeah, definitely. So for syncing, that's done differently for each probably product. Definitely this is true for videogrammetry.
I see. And is the audio captured as 360 as well?
As you may know, there's more and more companies coming in this field for really stereo and free sound experience. So I think the good way is that you can always implement the better technology into your setup. So it really should be, audio device, input device agnostic.
So in your setup with the Eevee, you were mentioning you can use like the Connect cameras, right? Or the Intel, what did you call them?
Intel Realsense.
The Realsense cameras.
Yeah, Intel Realsense, and they released last year with a lot of struggle, but that was their first 3D camera for the consumer, and it's 400 series cameras.
And the reason you need these cameras is they capture depth information. You need depth information for volumetric data. So what's the setup like for the Eevee? It's like, if I want to get into volumetric video, can I do this in my studio? Can I do this at home? What is the camera setup like? Can you explain the pipeline of Eevee?
So the thing is, you can use much fewer cameras, dramatically less than you would be using in videogrammetry setup. And because the single camera gives you the depth information real time. If you would be using a Realsense, so 6 cameras would be great for capturing one person. And there's, of course, a way to set up, and most of the time it goes around the object to really precisely capture.
So let's walk through this together. So you would have 6 Realsense cameras basically surrounding the person.
Yeah.
And those would be connected to your computer directly via USB?
Yeah.
So you have some sort of USB hub port or something that you connect them through, and then you would have your software running there to capture all that video?
Exactly. Simple as that. So what you need the sensors, the cameras, you need a cable, and you need a PC running Windows.
How powerful should a PC be to capture volumetric video from 6 cameras?
We're looking, in real numbers around $3,000, $4,000 machine.
But we're talking about like a GPU of a GTX 1080, a 1070, a 1060, or do you need the new RTXs?
Yeah, so we're looking about Titan.
Titan. Okay, so we're looking at it like a 1080 Titan at least.
Yeah, to handle it.
Right. So you do need a beefy computer to do volumetric video.
Powerful workstation that you would normally use. That's for sure. But I think that using one computer, it's a huge advantage because nevertheless, if you would be having less powerful machine, but you would need machine per camera. So you would need 6 computers. That would drastically increase the cost. So of course, we're working to put more cameras on one machine so that it would be, I think the thinking behind this is really that user would need to buy as little new equipment as possible.
So at a minimum, we'd need about 6 cameras with one computer. We can start rendering or we can start capturing with the EV software. Once it's captured, is it all rendered locally on your machine, or do we have to send it to the cloud to get it rendered, stitched, and put together?
A little bit different. You can capture with 2 Kinects a person because they're slightly different. The Realsenses, and they have their pros and cons. So 2 free Kinects, you can capture a person. But with Realsenses, you need a little bit more of these devices to capture it more precise. Because in the range of the camera, the quality decreases. Because it's different technology used in the sensor. But I'm very excited about the setup. Think, what if person could use his phone? Everybody have a smartphone, and there's a really powerful camera, and now every phone that comes, it comes with a 4K video. So if you can have 2 smartphones in the room, you can try out a volumetric video. So this is something I'm very excited, and we are experimenting how we could solve this.
But this is not happening today, you're saying, right? This is something you're working on to try to get it to work through phone cameras.
I hope this will happen pretty fast. Yes. Not today, but pretty fast.
Okay. But let's go back. I want to circle back to the Kinects and the IntelliSense ones, because I really want to understand the workflow, and I want people to understand the workflow. Once we've captured the data, whether it's through the Intel or the Microsoft Kinects, once it's captured, are we rendering, stitching, doing everything locally, or do we have to send it to the cloud to do that, and then we get back a final format? Can you guide us through that process?
So currently, you are processing this on your machine. What we're implementing in upcoming month or 2, it's the chance to render it on the cloud. So if you don't want to wait as long, every time you can pick up a more powerful server, computers where you can really decrease the time. And the next thing is, I think, which is important, if you're looking about the whole production, the other thing what comes, it's you want it as fast as possible. Because from photogrammetry, I'm probably going a little bit different direction, and this will be more technical. So let's better keep to your question, because I think this will probably is a little bit different topic that I wanted to go.
Sure, no problem. So once we've got it rendered, and obviously doing it in the cloud will speed things up, but let's talk about locally rendering and stitching, putting together. How long approximately does it take to render, let's say, a minute of volumetric data?
Now it's done in almost real time, so it takes very little time to wait. You can straight away play back it. But this, of course, decreases the quality a little bit. Or if not decreasing the quality, you can't improve much on it. So what processing gives us. So what we are implementing in different companies as well, it's post-processing opportunity, which really improves the quality. And then that's where you do some smart non-rigid surface reconstruction, really manipulating and synthesizing the data that you received.
I see. So that is more on the post-processing side with your software, it would be.
With our software, currently, it's about real time. So you can get the data as fast as possible and you can play back.
Got it. So what kind of tips or best practices would you give creators looking to capture volumetric data? What are some of your best practices that you recommend?
This is so complicated, So few people tested how to create or what's the process by their own. So I think the advice would be just to take few simple 3D cameras and to try playing with it. That's the first step.
Right, just to do it. But do you need, for example, good lighting? Do you need to do a lot of lighting just to make sure you capture the best possible video?
Sure, that helps. Yeah. If you can get the right lighting, you need really much less work on the final.
I see. What about encoding standards or encoding settings when capturing? Do you recommend any types of settings on that end? Mainly for your stuff, let's say.
We were making it as easy as possible so you could start straight away. Our philosophy is really to have as less configurations as possible to kick off.
So do you have any tips for creators wanting to get into volumetric data or volumetric video capture today? Any specific tips that, you would tell them, hey, if you're going to start doing this, make sure you do this or know this thing?
As I said, I think this is too early for that. I think just too few people tried it. So the main advice is really start doing this and then start sharing what you've done. And as more people, will share, you will get a lot of improvement. And you see a few different groups, in the social medium are growing and where a lot of people are exchanging different tips. But they're small things. It's really about, as you asked, about lighting, about equipment, about different 3D editing software. Apart of that, it's pretty simple.
So really, we're in the time period of experimentation, before we can even set standards or best practices. It's really everybody experimenting, and hopefully everybody comes together and puts together these standards.
Definitely. My biggest wish, as more we could start involved, as more people will come on board, so we will get the quality increased much faster and the standards will come much sooner and we will have these more polished experiences. And first of all, we will have experiences. Because now, as you see in the area, there's just a few volumetric video experiences that you can try. Although a few years have passed, there's still very, very few.
So what do you see as the future of volumetric video look like? If you had the power and control to shape it, what do you see? I mean, you kind of gave a hint about mobile phones, but what's your take on the future of volumetric video?
I think the other very interesting area is e-commerce. So what is coming is really a volumetric e-commerce. And I'm not talking specifically about VR, AR, or mixed reality headsets or screen-wise. Let's take a browser. It's really about starting to try things, to try out. So next time you're looking at, if you were a woman, a beautiful dress, so you know exactly how it looks, how it bends in the wind, and how it fits you. And from one aspect, you can look from many different directions onto the model wearing the dress. On the other aspect, you can have your own volumetric video, which clothes can be applied on, and you can see how it fits on you. Or you're buying a variety of different things. You can compare things if you have a volumetric model or volumetric video in front of you. So I think this is something very interesting, and this is something that is coming. And I think this is the beginning where every company will have their volumetric or 3D strategy on the web, because these things just becoming possible.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Totally. Well, Agnis, unfortunately, we're pretty much out of time. I really want to thank you for being on the podcast today. If people want to get a hold of you, do you want to give them an email address, a Twitter, or whatever you like?
Of course. So whatever question you have or idea you would like to share, we're very open and really very open to sharing our things in the lab that we're just trying. And some of the things not definitely will go on the app and you want to try it out. So you can contact me directly by email, agnis@efev.com, or on many other channels via social. I try to be as clear as possible. Not every time it happens for me, but I hope I added some value for people who will be starting or looking to start their career or their, just experiments in volumetric video. And then want to thank you, Marcelo, for inviting on this talk.
You added tons of value, and thank you for sharing your knowledge. You were great, so I really appreciate that.
Thank you very much.
Well, thanks again, Agnis, and to the rest of you, I'm glad you're here with us. Just a quick reminder, if you want to access all of our live events, tutorials, practice assets, podcast interviews, videos, and more, register for free at howtocreatevr.com. Finally, if you want to attend our live events in virtual reality, join us inside Altspace VR. Just visit howtocreatevr.com/AltSpaceVR and subscribe to our channel. So until the next episode, I'm Marcelo Lewin. Cheers, everyone.